Hello and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Ruby. I'm a professional psychic medium, tarot reader, astrologer, priestess, and spiritual guide. And today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite tarot and oracle decks of 2025. Let's get into how this list works. For a tarot or oracle deck to be included in my end of favorites list, it has to have been purchased that year. So, all of the tarot and oracle decks that I am going to share with you today came into my collection in 2025. Some of them are new decks, some of them have been around for a while, several years actually, but all of these decks were new to me in the last year. And this actually was a pretty slim year for me in terms of decks that were coming into my collection, hence why we have both tarot and oracle in one video this year. But I really, really love all of the decks that I'm about to show you. So even though it was like a smaller year for me in terms of new decks coming into my collection, the decks that did make it into my collection in 2025 are really, really rich and powerful and potent, and I'm excited to share my favorites with you. So, without further ado, let's get into my favorite decks of the year. We're going to begin with the tarot decks, and these are in no particular order. So, my first favorite tarot deck of 2025 is the Void Tarot. Now, this is an indie deck. It was created by, I believe, Sarai Neeson is the name of the deck creator, but don't quote me on that. And I picked this deck up at Ritual Craft, which is a metaphysical store that's local to where I live. I didn't have any plans on purchasing the deck. It was an impulse purchase. And I am just so blown away by how special and unique this deck is. First of all, really nice cardstock. I love the all black. And these are the backings, which have this beautiful bikini, succubus, vampiric, dark feminine vibe. And there's something about these cards that really just tickle my, like, inner middle school goth girl. That was definitely a, theme of my middle school years, was a lot of, Hot Topic. But even more so, this deck has been an incredible tool for connecting in with the energy of the dark feminine and especially the energy of Lilith. So this deck came into my collection pretty early in the year. I want to say maybe January of 2025. And I really enjoyed it right from the get-go, but it wasn't heavy in my rotation until this past fall when I began a Kali sadhana and when I began working with Lilith more intensely. And for working with Lilith, this has become my favorite deck. It's a deck that I use much more in my personal practice than I do in my professional practice. This deck doesn't come out for clients that much, but for shadow work and for connecting with the energy of Lilith or the dark feminine, I find this to be a very truthful reader and a very immersive deck. It has a very clear worldview. It has a very clear perspective, and just like the gothic, more like Edward Gorey illustrations. Again, it really does something to my soul. So I can see myself using this deck just as much in 2026 as I used it in the past year. I have been really enjoying it for new moon spread specifically. Really adds to kind of like the dark, more gothic, Victorian energy that this deck holds. And I think it's a good one. If you are looking for an indie deck that's high quality, I haven't shown you the guidebook, but the guidebook is also really lovely, all black, reproductions of all the card images. And again, this is a good deck for deepening your practice, for bringing in the energy of the dark feminine, and for potentially having a deck that you might want to use in ritual and ceremony, or doing that more inner deep excavation of checking in with the self and checking in with the psyche. The next tarot deck on the list is the Morgan Greer Tarot. Now, this deck has been out for a while. I'm probably the last person to add this to their collection, but I picked this deck up in New Orleans this year. I went for a birthday trip and I didn't own this deck yet. They had it at my favorite local botanica in New Orleans. There was something about seeing it in that Botanica that drew me in. I've actually been with friends when they purchased this deck before, and it's never called to me, but for whatever reason, it called to me this year, and I have been really enjoying working with it. In fact, this deck has been my primary client reader since I picked it up this past spring. Now, this is a mass market deck. I believe it's published by US Games, but yes, so this is a US Games deck. Nothing super special about the card stock or the backings, but there's just something about this artwork that really speaks to me and I find very pleasant to read with. This deck has a very 70s medieval revival vibe to it, and the color palette, the illustrations, there's something just very vintage, nostalgic. And again, it has this like 70s Love Witch vibe to it, which for whatever reason, just at this current time, I can't get enough of. And in terms of how this deck reads, I mean, it's very much a Rider Waite Smith. I don't want to say a Rider Waite Smith knockoff, but it doesn't veer from traditional Rider Waite Smith symbolism too much. So you don't need a guidebook for this deck if you are already familiar with the Rider Waite Smith system. You're going to be able to read with this deck just fine. I love this death card. And, like, I don't think that this is a necessity for everyone's collection. Like, this is a really good work reader for me. Like, unlike the Void Tarot, I don't think it's giving me, like, a new perspective that I couldn't find in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith cards. And nor do I use this deck to work with a particular energy or for a particular spiritual purpose. This is a divination deck for me, pure and simple. And we have a really lovely working relationship. And again, there's just something about this 70s medieval revival artwork, the saturation of the colors, that is just it just does something for me. I have a feeling this is a deck that I will, like, read till I'm absolutely sick of it, and then put it away for a couple years, and then come back to it. But it's one of those decks, I can't tell you exactly why she's in my hands so much, but barely a reading, like a professional reading, goes by in which I don't use this deck these days. The next tarot deck on the list is the Tarot of Persephone's Garden Cathonia edition. This is by indie deck creator Cara Small. Her handle is Forest Moon Maiden on Instagram, and I believe it's Chthonic Forest on Etsy. Now, the original version of the Tarot of Persephone's Garden was on my favorite tarot decks of 2024. It was on last year's list. In fact, I think both of Forest Moon Maiden's decks were on my list for last year. And so she sent me this, the Chthonian version of the Tarot of Persephone's Garden, and I love this deck so much. It is now the deck I use most from this specific creator. It's very similar to the original Tarot of Persephone's Garden. The only changes are to the backings. There is a dark, like a darker backing, and then some of the images have been changed as well from the original version. I love using this deck for personal readings. As much as I love the original Tarot of Persephone's Garden, there's something about the flavor of this Chthonian edition that just speaks to me a little bit more. Maybe it's my Pluto first house, Sun Pluto, but I really enjoy the slightly darker feel to this specific version. Now, I traveled a lot this year, and this was my go-to deck to take with me traveling. This deck traveled a lot with me, and it's it's a personal deck. Once in a while, I use it to read for clients, but this deck for me is a connection to the energies of the divine feminine that I walk with and venerate. So I use this deck a lot for connecting in with Mary Magdalene, for connecting in with Isis, for connecting in with other energies, faces of the sacred feminine that I regularly connect with in my practice. And this deck does a really lovely job of blending divination, being a divinatory reader, with offering some deeper spiritual insight. And there's a lot to contemplate with the choice of imagery, and the pre-Raphaelites are like just my favorites. So the artwork here also I'm very sentimental about and feel very connected to. I'm just going to show you this Two of Cups. It's the last card I will show you. I am not sure if this deck is still available for purchase. You would want to check with the deck creator. Her Etsy will have it, I'm sure, if it's still available for purchase. Even if it's not, keep an eye on this deck creator because I like every single deck that I have purchased or received from them and the card stock. Like, that's the last thing I'll say about this deck. For how much I've used it this past year, it has held up remarkably well. And this textured card stock, there's something about it that I love. It is my favorite. I know that I said that these tarot decks are in no particular order, but this next tarot deck might be my favorite deck of the year, and it is one of my favorite tarot decks of all time, and it is the Lacrimosa Tarot by Rose Bay Tarot. Now, I'm just obsessed with Rose Bay Tarot as a deck creator. Her deck, the Sistine Tarot, was on my favorite decks list of 2024 and was my all-time favorite deck of 2024. Just like I've loved that deck so much. I didn't think I could love a deck any more than I love the Sistine Tarot by Rose Bay Tarot. And then this deck came out, and this deck I at least love just as much. I am not sure if this deck is still available for purchase, but I'm sharing it because this is my truth, y'all. This is my favorite deck of the year. And so that you are aware of this deck creator for when they release new decks, because they do often release decks that are indie, usually through like a third party seller, like Make Playing Cards. And so if you blink, sometimes you'll miss a Rose Bay Tarot deck, and you never want to miss a Rose Bay Tarot deck. So let me show you the backs. Similar to the Void Tarot, this deck has a very Victorian, gothic, macabre, like eerie, vampiric feeling to it. And oh my God, you guys, this deck, it reads like a dream. It is so moody. It has such a clear worldview. This has been my deck for connecting in with Mary Magdalene. We have Lucifer here as the Tower card. So, similarly to the Sistine Tarot, Rose Bay Tarot takes these archetypes and she spins them on their head, but in a way that is still so true to their expression and to their archetypal energy. So, we have the High Priestess here, and oh my God, I love this High Priestess. Now, I love using this deck for past life work. I love using this deck for shadow work. I love using this deck for connecting in with my deities. And there's something about this deck that is very confronting, but also very empowering, like the energy of the dark goddess herself. And so if I'm wanting to connect in with Mary Magdalene more as a priestess of transformation and death and rebirth, connecting with Mary Magdalene more in her darker phase, I would use this deck over the Tarot of Persephone's Garden, Chthonic Edition. Even just the color palette here, the blacks and the reds, and these like golden tones, very evocative to me of how the energy of Mary Magdalene shows up. I've also used this deck to connect in with Babylon and to connect in with Sarah Lakali and the Black Madonna. So the darker faces of the Christian pantheon really like to come out with this one, which makes sense with this kind of darker, almost sacrilegious, but not quite religious imagery. Oh, and look at this chariot. There's also something that feels just so dark feminine about all the artwork choices that are used. And then I love the Justice card in the Tarot Persephone's Garden, and I love the Justice card here too. As much as I am a Pre-Raphaelite girl, I'm also a Caravaggio girl. So between the Lacrimosa tarot and the Tarot Persephone's Garden, like all of my art hoe tendencies are fulfilled. All the art hoe desires have been actualized this year. I'm very happy to say. Now, the next deck on the list I saved for last because it straddles the line between tarot and oracle, at least how I use it. And it is the Mysteries of the Red Madonna Mary Magdalene Tarot deck by Hettian Grobler. Now, this is not only an indie deck, but an investment piece. You can purchase it on Hettian Grobler's website. She also has an excellent Patreon that I am subscribed to that I recommend. I think it's called The Mysteries of Mary, and her website, if I'm not mistaken, is Her Grace Sacred Art. She does ship internationally, so that's something you might want to keep an eye on because how easy that is to navigate has changed a lot in the last year. Now, this is the second deck from Hettian that I own. I also own her first Mysteries of Mary tarot deck. They're set up very similarly, and that even though these are tarot decks, the minor arcana is essentially its own system. And the way that this deck is laid out, I think it's easier to use it like an oracle with a pull a daily draw or pull 1 to 3 cards and then consult the guidebook, because out of all of the tarot decks on the list, this has the best guidebook hands down. Like if you are interested in Mary Magdalene, I think it's worth it to purchase this deck just for the guidebook. But let's look at the images as well, because the images for this deck are gorgeous. Now, like I said, this is a study deck and it is dense. Like, look how thick these cards are. Look how thick this guidebook is. And so, if you are interested in a tarot deck that you are going to use as a tool for divination and you want to connect with Mary Magdalene, this wouldn't necessarily be my first choice for you. I would go with the Tarot of Persephone's Garden, Chthonic Edition, or the Lacrimosa Tarot. This is more for deepening your connection to the Marian mysteries, to the mysteries of Mary Magdalene and the Red Madonna. So each card is full of so much imagery and symbolism and comparative spirituality and occult knowledge. And in the guidebook for each card, Hetty and Grobler really lays out all of the comparative spirituality and mythology that she is weaving together with each card. And so this deck creator really speaks to me as someone that also frames my work with the goddess and my spiritual practice this way. Similar to Hetty and Grobler, I really connect the mysteries of the Red Madonna and Mary Magdalene and Yeshua to Shakti Tantra and to Tantric philosophy. And so I feel that I approach not only Mary Magdalene, but spirituality from a very similar place that this deck is approaching the Mary Magdalene teachings and the Magdalene wisdom stream. And if you are a Magdalene priestess or you work with the Red Goddess, you're a Tantrika, and you want to deepen your personal connection to these archetypes, these myths, these stories, these teachings, I think this is a really, really lovely, unique deck. The cardstock is beautiful. How the deck is packaged and mailed to you is beautiful. I think it is worth the investment. And my only real caveat here is that I don't think this deck is that great for divination in the sense that I wouldn't pull this or this deck out and do a big spread with it. Maybe I'll eventually get there, but even though I've had this deck for months now, I think I got it maybe in May or June of 2025 is when it was shipped to me. I'm still really immersing myself in this deck and getting to know this deck. And this deck is usually a daily draw for me. And it's been a very useful tool in not just my connection with Mary Magdalene, but in deepening my understanding of how much her energy is immersed and encoded in other tales of the goddess and religions and spiritual beliefs as well. So it's a dense one, it's an esoteric one. I'm very happy I have it in my collection. I use it a lot more than I have used the original Mysteries of Mary deck. And this is like less of a deck and more of a spiritual tool or something to really have in your arsenal for teaching, for learning, for ceremony, and for altar work. Now, let's get into my favorite oracle decks of the year. This first oracle deck on the list has been out for a while, but it didn't come into my collection until this past spring, and it is the Priestess of Light oracle deck. This is a mass market deck. I believe it is published by Hay House. Yes, by Sandra Ann Taylor and Kimberly Weber. I got this deck in New Mexico. It just kind of showed up in my life. I wasn't planning on purchasing it like the Void Tarot. It was a right place, right time impulse purchase. And I am shocked by how much I love this deck. And I cannot believe it took me this long to add it to my collection. Now, this deck really speaks to me as a priestess of Mary Magdalene and a priestess of Isis. And it really has this beautiful Egyptian, golden, divine mother, priestess energy. It's pretty typical in terms of, guidebook and cardstock for a Hay House deck. I love this Mary Magdalene. What sets it apart is the content itself. I feel it is really in alignment with the work I do as a priestess, with initiations on the priestess path. I'm actually shocked by how much I love it. This deck, I think I was first made aware of it a couple of years ago, and the images I saw didn't necessarily speak to me, and I wrote it off. But no, this deck is it's probably one of my all-time favorite oracle decks at this point. I use it in my professional practice and my personal practice. Ugh, like I want to say equally, but it probably is a little more alive in my personal practice. But for my clients I see once a month who I do priestess training and more spiritual initiations with, this deck comes out a lot. And so, what this deck usually wants to speak on is the priestess path, spiritual path, and there's a sense of this deck really being a gatekeeper of spiritual themes and initiations I'm moving through. So this deck is usually the first to tell me, what's up, what's the deeper purpose or the deeper theme around something I'm currently walking in my life. And again, for the faces of the sacred feminine that I connect in with, this deck really hits the spot. So I would say like Isis, Anana, Ishtar, Venus, Mary Magdalene. This has some like very like Dakini energy as well. And while not every card image is my favorite, I do really like a lot of the artwork here. It really speaks to me. It also has this beautiful like Mother Earth or shamanic lens to it as well. So, the whole point of the priestess path is being the bridge between spirit and matter. And I feel this deck really understands that and gets it right. The next Oracle deck on the list is actually a 2-for-1 special. I have two decks here in this next spot because I got them together. I purchased them at the same time and they really work together. They're two sides of the same coin. And this is the Voices of the Soul Oracle and the Cries of the Soul Oracle, both published by Rockpool, both by deck creator Isabel Surf. Now, these decks are shadow work decks. I do not love them necessarily for the guidebook or the artwork. The artwork, there's nothing wrong with it. It's pretty sparse. I would not pick this deck up because the artwork spoke to me. I will say that. The reason why these decks are in my collection is because of how effective and to the point and useful they are for not just shadow work, but past life work, karmic work, figuring out, okay, what is the like deepest root here? What is the karmic pattern that keeps repeating? Like what is the chironic wound? So these decks are not light and fuzzy. This is the backing for the Voices of the Soul Oracle and then the backing for the Cries of the Soul Oracle. Now, in all honesty, I have used the Cries of the Soul Oracle a lot more than I have used this first deck. Not because this deck isn't good, but because this deck I think is even more ruthless and severe. I'm going to show you some cards from both of them now. So, I feel the Voice of the Soul Oracle is much more stripped down in terms of what it's giving you. For the Voices of the Soul Oracle, I use this for core themes if I am wanting to clarify something. So if I want to clarify why a certain tarot card is coming up or why certain themes are coming up, and again, I want it as like simple as possible, I am going to probably pick up the Voice of the Soul's Oracle over the Cries of the Soul Oracle. And as you can see, like this is, um, the artwork isn't bad. You're just getting more from the specificity and the brevity of the message than you are from the artwork. Okay, now I want to show you the Cries of the Soul Oracle because this is the one I'm using the most. I've used this probably every day that I read for clients since maybe since the summer. Um, this is the shadow work deck, right? So where the Voice of the Soul deck as the shadow work, it can be useful for shadow work. I could say it's like shadow work. Um, hmm, it's like tangential shadow work, right? This is 100% shadow work. You're not getting out of the shadow work here. You're definitely getting more divinatory messages with each card. So unlike the first deck, you're getting a little more in terms of card meaning and card definition. And for, again, getting to the root wound, that root chironic wound, getting into the root motive of another person, maybe why something is happening, why you're reacting a certain way. Like, I just don't think anything beats this one. It's like a sleeper hit for me. I was not expecting that I was going to utilize this deck as much as I do, and it's definitely a deck that's in my collection, not because of aesthetics, but because of how it works and how it reads. So I love this one. I'm going to continue to use it in probably all of my client readings. And similar to the Les Vampire Oracle by Lucy Cavendish, there's a compassion, but a precision with this one. So I find that I grab it a lot. Like, I go for this deck a lot. I grab it a lot. If I'm ever feeling like there's something that I'm missing, it's because maybe I don't want to see it and this deck is going to show it to me. So this deck will show you the thing that maybe you're missing because it's not nice or you don't like it or it's so in your unconscious or your shadow that you're not even able to perceive it. All right. The last oracle deck on the list. And again, even though these aren't in order, I think I picked the best for last here. We have the Cave of Sybil Oracle by Tierra May. I am not sure if this deck is still available for purchase, but this deck is so magical and deep and rich that I had to include it in this list. It would be dishonest for me to not include it. Now, this deck is more than just an oracle deck. This deck is very immersive. This deck is full-blown art. It's not just that I use this deck to channel the energy of the dark feminine, it's that this deck inherently is the energy of the dark feminine. And this deck is like looking into the void. If you want a neat divinatory answer, this is not the deck. This is the deck for really having more questions than answers at the end of the day, but your questions have now been deepened and they've gotten more nuanced and maybe you're looking at the situation at hand from a different perspective. So these are the backs of the cards, and the title for each card is on the back. And there's so much emotion and information and like vibe that you get with each card. This is the Sybil card, that you almost don't even need the guidebook. And the guidebook is very poetic. It is, meant to deepen your, I think, relationship or your experience with the card than it is to can give you any type of definitive answer. This deck is very lunar. It's very much the energy of the new moon, of the crone, of the bardo. I like to use this deck a lot in ritual and ceremony and at night, which Tira May, the deck creator, recommends. She recommends you use this deck at night, but there's something so liminal and threshold crossing about this deck that it just makes sense to use this deck at night. And it's very much Black Moon Lilith, the not just Lilith, but what Black Moon Lilith astrologically represents. The exiled feminine, our guilt, our shame, our disowned power, our sexuality, our rage, our darkness. Like all of that feels included in this deck. I love using this deck in tandem with the Void Tarot and the Lacrimosa Tarot. Feel like all of these decks have something similar, and I think it's interesting that all of these decks came into my collection this year as I really deepened my own connection with the Black Madonna and the Dark Mother. So, for altar work, for ceremonial work and ritual work, I think this deck is really lovely. I think this deck is also really lovely if you want to push your boundaries and your edges with how you read tarot and oracle. If you want to, more treat tarot and oracle like a black mirror that you are scrying into. Like, this is the black mirror you scry into. It's going to require that you open up more to lunar consciousness, imaginal consciousness, and you follow the lead that this deck is taking you down. And, following the lead is following the torch as you go into the cave, as you go into the underworld. I just can never get enough of this deck, though, and I'm pretty selective with her. Like, I've never used this deck in a client reading. I think I only ever would if the situation ever calls for it. I use this deck for some of the deepest and most liminal spiritual work I do. And she's been coming out a lot more recently, I think, because seasonally this is such a good time to work with this deck. It's really dark out, really early, it's cold, it's, winter time, and I'm feeling more inclined to kind of go within and to write poetry and to reflect. And there's something about this deck that is just like the perfect accompaniment for that. Um, Anything else I want to say about her? I would use this deck to connect in with Babylon, Medusa, the Black Madonna. To me, this is the deck of the Black Madonna. Sekhmet, um, Santa Muerta, like Kalima, and some of Kalima's like more fiercer aspects, like Chamunda, Dumavati. This card is called Skinwalker. It's a really beautiful guide into the unconscious and into the places of your own psyche that maybe scare you a little bit. And I love her. And anything Tira May does has this just elevation to it. It's so elevated. It feels like art. It feels like ritual. Like her first tarot deck is so aptly named. And see, it's called a spell book and not a guidebook. And I think that's the vibe. There's also something about this deck that really harkens to like the medieval witch who is like consorting with the devil, like the puritanical witch who's like consorting with the goat. There's something about this deck that's like that primal, dark, witchy woman. So if you want to activate that within yourself, I mean, I don't even know if you can still purchase this deck, but I would try to get my hands on it if you can. So there you have it, my favorite tarot and oracle decks from the last year, 2025. Please share what your favorite tarot and oracle decks were this past year in the comments below. I always love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this content, you can like, subscribe, and I also have a Patreon where I update and post fresh content weekly. So maybe I'll see you there as well.